Hey guys, and welcome to /X Games, and also welcome to GameMaker Studio 2. So this is going to be the very first GameMaker Studio tutorial I do. It's not very specific to GameMaker Studio 2 because there aren't any new functions or functionality that Studio or GM8 even can't do. So we're going to be pretty much just exploring a bit of the GUI while we tackle tab targeting. So tab targeting is basically you have your player in the game world, and when you push the tab key, automatically your player is going to target an enemy. So this is going to be the very simple, basic version of tab targeting. Later on, I'd like to go into more sophisticated concepts such as only targeting enemies in the player's view or only targeting enemies that are within a certain range, depending on perhaps the player's weapon. So we'll get to those in a revisited tutorial. I didn't want to get into too much detail, especially because this is the first GameMaker Studio 2 video that I am uploading. I'd also like to do a later on video where we actually explore more of the GUI concepts, because we're not going to be touching all of them in this video today. So, as you can see on your left, over here we have the recent projects. I've done the tab targeting, so that was the planning for this video. I've actually got a second copy of GameMaker Studio 2 running on my second monitor on my right. And over there, I'm going to be following it as I planned it out before. Okay, so I'm going to click New. And it's going to be the GameMaker language. Then I'm going to be saving this in my /X Games folder on my PC. I've got RTS tab targeting right over here. It's got Sprites. I will be including and bundling all of this up in the project files, which you can find at the bottom of this video straight in the description. So let's create a new folder. And let's say tab targeting right over there. And we need to select this. Say open. Give it the file name. Tab targeting project. And save. Alright, so here we are within our workspace. Now GameMaker Studio 2 gives us the option of having multiple workspaces. We can add them and remove them on the top left. And instead of our resource tree being on the left hand side, we can see it's now here on the right. So that's a new fantastic change. Okay, so the GUI of this whole application is completely different. So it's going to take us some time to get used to it. So please excuse me if I do make any blunders. But I do enjoy exploring. The best way to do that is just to dive in head first. Okay, so in this game, I'm going to be creating 3 objects. One's going to be the object player. The second one's going to be an object minion, so that's going to be something we can target. And the third thing is going to be something called a selectable. Now, a selectable is going to be my parent, because technically we can select our player and we can select an enemy. So in that sense, they share some code. And then in the object player and object minion, which is the enemy, we will then either inherit from that selectable parent or override it with custom code. So let's import some sprites over here. Let's go right click on sprites. Let's say create. Things are pretty straightforward so far. Here is our sprite editor. Very different to what we're used to. So I'm going to go import. I need to go one up to sprites. Let's import our people. Like that. Open. Let's see what this does. Okay, cool. So there are sprites. They are a sequence of images. If I click on each one, we can edit them individually if we want to. But in my case, I don't want to create a sprite for every single guy. I don't want a sprite AK, a sprite normal, silver, whatever, and a sprite dual, and a sprite shotgun, and a sprite Uzi, and a sprite worker. Now, I'm just going to put them all in here, and then when I want to create a different type of minion or player, I'm just going to give it a different image index. You might have seen me do this before. It's quite straightforward stuff. So sprite, let's call these skins. And then we can say over here, we can choose the origin. We've got all kinds of interesting new ways. So let's say middle center over there. And actually, we want to put it over here somewhere. So I think if I remember correctly, that was somewhere along the lines of 23, 23. And we're going to push enter on that. Cool, so this should set the center for everything right over there. This one's slightly off, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So that's sprite skins already. I'm going to accept that. I just click exit and it should save. Now, next thing, I want to create a sprite for the selector. So it's going to be a ring that kind of animates it. It rotates. So you can see what player is selected or what enemy is targeted. So SPR, let's call this our select. Again, I'm going to import from my resource folder. Sprite enemy select and sprite player select. Yes, that's fine. There we go. We've got two like that. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, with this one we can just say center, middle, center. Perfectly done like that. And that's pretty much all we need to do. So we've got all kinds of other things. We could collision masks. We can tile certain things. We can actually double click on these to go to the sprite editor. That is also much more complex than it used to be. So I'm not going to feature it in this video, but later on we will take a look at what that's about. And we've got our basic information right over here. So let's again exit that. We're good with it. So let's dive headfirst into our objects. Create an object. Now this is awesome. Check this out. We've got our properties as before, and here we've got our events. So the GUI is slightly similar. These are linked by this little tether over here, but they're kind of spaced out a bit. It's a more modern feel. I actually do like it to a certain degree. Let's go and create the object selectable. Let's just give it a default sprite for now. It's going to be sprite skins. Also, this has changed slightly. Very cool. You can change the zoom of that if you want to see them clearly. And then these are the events. So if I click on parent, it's going to open up a separate tether. If I click physics, it's going to do a further tether. And that's pretty cool. Everything's kind of there. And I can scroll up and down. And we can see there's a little bar here, which we can use to make it smaller or larger, just in case we want to fit in more information or see more things about that box tethered to our object. So that's pretty cool. We don't need parent right now. Events. Let's jump straight into the events of a selectable. Now, this is another really cool thing that we're going to see in a second. Oh, we can actually hide this. That's fun. And the zoom of this is a little bit dodge. It's okay for now. Kind of gets a bit low res when we zoom in, but it's okay. I think we'll survive with that for now. Let's go add an event. Let's start with the create. See what opens up. Bam. So again, we have another tether. So this code block is tethered to the events block, which is then tethered to our object. Really cool stuff. Here we can put in a description. It's again the 3 forward slashes. So here I can say initialize object. So I want to choose a random subimage for the player, and not only that, I also want to select a rotation speed. So this is actually more specifically for my player, because when we target someone else, he's going to rotate to that person as if he were to attack. So here I'm going to say, well, we need to randomize the seed. I'm going to create var n equals irandom5. Okay, so that's going to get a random integer between 0 and 5, which is for our image indexes, because we have 6 images. Then I'm going to say, well, sprite index equals sprite skins. We have actually set this in the object itself, but just do it again, doesn't really matter. And our image index is then going to be n. Okay, so if it's 0, it's going to be the first guy. If it is 5, it's going to be the worker, I think it was, which is the 6th image in our array. Next, I'm going to do a switch on the n. And this is going to say, well, case 0, break. And if it's case 0, well, then our rotation speed, this is purely added extra, has nothing to do with tabbing. Set that to 2. Now let's do this a couple more times. And let's make it default. Default can be, I don't know, something fast. Let's make it a 7. Okay, let's make some random things. 4, 7, 8, 3. Let's go for a 10 for that one. Okay, cool. So different rotation speeds. Let's beef this one up again a bit more. It's a bit too slow. Okay, cool. Different rotation speeds, and that'll be assigned depending on the value of n, which is over there, and it's a temporary variable, so we won't be able to use it anywhere else, which is fine. Then let's set a random image angle, just like that. Obviously, it's not selected. This is a variable that we will be overriding for our player, because our player is always going to be selected, because if this is an RPG game, we want to kind of click our player and right click on him to move, and then if you push tab, it's going to be targeting an enemy for that player, that kind of stuff, which we will also revisit in a more advanced tutorial later on. So selector angle, this is going to be the animation for the spinning thing. Oops, this is not irandom range, this is just irandom. Good stuff. Okay, so that's our create event. We can save. Let's go on to our step events. This is just going to basically be controlling the selector that's going to be rotating. So rotate selector. notice these descriptions go over there. So if selected, selector angle, I'm going to increase it by 4 degrees per step. And here we've got tabs. That's also pretty awesome stuff. That's selector angle over there. Okay, cool. So we can control S to save. Let's now add event for mouse left pressed. So this is going to be select object. So firstly, let's deselect all other, say minions. These are going to be enemies. Okay, with object minion, which we haven't created yet. Selected equals false. And then we only want to select this one. Just like that. Cool. Let's save again. Then let's do the global left pressed. So this is actually going to be deselect objects. So if you click out in the world, so I'm going to say if not position meeting. So if we are clicking somewhere that doesn't have a minion, so it's going to be mouse X and mouse Y of object minion. Alright. Well then, selected equals false. So every single object is going to detect this click, and they're going to deselect themselves. And then also, with our object player, which we haven't created either, if the user left clicks somewhere else in the game world, well then he's not going to have a target. We'll create this variable later. And also, his target number is going to equal to -1. So let me explain these two. So whenever the player pushes tab, it's going to select an enemy or a minion. Target is going to have the instance ID of that object, of the instance of that object, and target number is going to have the object number. So that's going to be, if there are 5 instances of type minion in the game world, and we are currently targeting the second one, then this is going to have the ID of that second one, and this is going to have 2 in it. And then when we push tab, this one's going to jump to 3, and it's going to use that 3 to then find the ID, and it's going to be using those. Those two variables are going to be helping each other out to determine what the next target number is and what the ID of the current target is. Really cool stuff. Okay, so that's pretty much everything we need to do for this selectable. We can use the middle mouse button to move around, which is really cool. If you're familiar with other design packages, middle mouse button to move is quite a standard thing. It's a pity you can't middle mouse button if you're on an object, so sometimes you want to hurriedly move down and you kind of do that, which is a little irritating, but you'll get the hang of things. So now that we've done that, we can actually leave it floating about. Let's make this a bit smaller. Don't need to be so large. Let's bring this in again. We need to create another object, and for this I'm actually going to duplicate object selectable. Let's call this obj minion. Okay, good. Double click him. Cool, it opens him up right below. So while we're here, let's go parent. Let's set his parent to be object selectable. So now if we go up to object selectable and open up the parent tether over here, blam, object minion is right there waiting for him. Cool, so let's keep going down again. So in object minion, let's go to the create, let's delete all that code, and we can just say event inherited. Then we're going to go to the step, and we're going to do the same. Just like that. Left pressed is going to have the same. Global left pressed is going to have the same. And the only thing it's going to have different is going to be a draw event. And this draw event, we can go to that, it's going to say if selected, well then I want to draw the selector around myself. Draw sprite ext. I'm going to say I want to draw sprite select. I want it to have a 1 if we see what this is. Subimage of 1. So let's see. This is a minion, this is bad. So that's going to have actually be a 0. It's going to be on the x and y of this object. It's going to have a perfect scale of 1:1. It's going to have a selector angle for its image angle. And it's going to be C white, which means no color alterations. And let's make it 0.7 opacity right over there. That is the alpha. And then also draw self. It needs to Draw self. Excellent. So that, my friends, is everything we need for the minion. So let's save his work. Everything's saved. Let's create another object, which is actually going to duplicate the minion. And this one's going to be called, you guessed it, Object Player, which also has the selectable as the parent. Now that we've created this little fellow, if we go up to the object selectable, we can scroll up, he should have 2 children. Very good. Okay, let's keep scrolling down. Alright, so Object Player is going to have a lot of the magic. He inherits his event, his create event at least, from the parent, and then also he is selected, so that's true. His target number is going to be initialized to -1. His left pressed event is inherited, that's fine. His draw event is very similar to the enemy, only this is going to be a 1 now, so that's going to be the green one. If we double click on here, it's going to be this one, 0, 1, so that's good. Another thing I can do is actually, one thing you couldn't do with GameMaker Studio is change the speed to 0. So before, every time I wanted to create a sequence of sub-images, but use them as a collection of resources to pick out certain images of the same type, I'd have to set the image speed to 0 on every object. But now you can set the image speed to 0 right here in the sprite itself, which is really, really cool. So I can do that to both of these right over there, and I don't have to say image speed equals 0 on any of the objects that use those sprites. So back to Object Player, his draw is going to be A1, which is the green one, which is the good selectable. He's not going to be listening for this global left pressed, so I can delete that. Or at least we don't need to add any other events to that. So let's head over to the step event. A lot of the incredible magic that we're going to be seeing in this tutorial comes from this step event. So let's bump event inherited down. Let's create our triple forward slashes with our @ description over here. And I'm going to say rotate and, I'm going to say target enemy and rotate. Okay, so that's going to rotate to the targeted enemy. Let's firstly say var inst equals no one. And I'm going to use the with construction to say with object minions, rotate to one that's selected. So we're not going to be using the targeted variable because that might be null. This is just going to be a random check in the background. Maybe later on we can use target more effectively, add some checks and whatnot. But for now, let's just do something really basic. So if selected, then I'm going to say, well, then inst equals the ID of that minion. If inst is not equal to no one, then here I'm going to do a smooth rotation. Point direction equals point direction. Here I'm going to say the x and the y is going to be looking at inst x and inst y. So we want to go and rotate towards the instance that we see is selected. We look at their x and y coordinate, but we're going to do that slowly. So I'm going to do image angle plus equals the sine degrees to radians, degrees to radians of the point direction, which is just what we calculated, minus the image angle plus the rotation speed. So rotation speed is what we initialized in the create event of the parent. If you don't understand those 2 lines of code, I do have a tutorial dedicated specifically to smooth rotations. Link will be in the description. Check that out, it's really cool. It's one of my favorites. We should also spell things properly. So now let's work on the magic. I think something's missing here. No, one of those. There we go. I'm going to say if keyboard check, and I'm going to say pressed because I don't want it to cycle if held down. This is going to be pressed for every time we want to target a new enemy. And this is going to be VK tab. Here I'm going to say deselect all minions with object minion selected equals false if target number equals -1. Okay, so if we haven't targeted anyone yet, well then target number is going to equal 0. Simple as that. Otherwise, here we need to make sure that if we're at the last targeted instance, we need to go back to the first one. So if the target number +1 equals the instance number of object minions, then the target number goes back to 0. Otherwise, scroll down, target number ++. Okay, so instance numbers start at 1. So if you got 5 creatures in your room, it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 creatures. But to target those, it's going to be referring them as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have to do this little piece of magic here to do the comparisons, and that should all work fine. So now that we've done that, we can say target equals instance find object minion target number. Yes, target number can be any value from 0 onwards. So then I'm going to say, well, with the target, very specific instance of object minion, he is now selected. And right at the end, let's inherit all the events. Okay, so if you don't know, I've put event inherited everywhere, but basically you should only really put event inherited in the code of an event if you want to not only take the code from the parent, but also add code from the child. If I leave out this event inherited and have all this code, this object, even though it is a child of object selectable, will not get the step event code of the selectable. So later on, to clean things up, you can actually go into the events of your children and delete pretty much any events where you haven't written custom code for the children, because they will then automatically just inherit the main events. Okay, so that about wraps things up. Let's run this and see what happens. But actually, before we can do that, thinking of it, we need to make a room. So let's go to rooms, let's say create. Again, this is a fantastic new screen that we've never seen before. Let's remove the grid. Okay, so on the left here, we've got some layers. That's pretty awesome stuff. We've got some instances. We can scroll down to views and physics. Room settings. So let's make this 1280 by 720. That's the room width and height. Collapse that. Then actually, we can drag things in. So there's some minions. So we can put in as many as we want. And let's put our player in over there. We can use Control to zoom out and get a better view of our entire room. And there's our workspace, there's our room. There's the tabs, and there's a second workspace that we don't really need, so that can close. Okay, cool. Room editor's done over there. Don't need room 0, let's delete that one. Just want room 1, which we're going to rename to RM Game World. Just like that. Okay, so now that we have everything, we can in actual fact test that everything works. So let's save, and then here let's go run. So here's our console at the bottom, very similar to GameMaker Studio. It's busy compiling everything right now, and it has come up with some errors. Okay, so let's go into these and see what it says. Target number -1, so that needs to be equals. Next, duplicate case statement found. Oh right, of course, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Next one, original here, duplicate original here. Next thing, we've got malformed assignment statement. So we fixed that. So let's save again. Errors are fixed. It's actually much nicer to get to those errors. That's really quick and cool. Let's run again and see if everything's good. Okay, so here's our player. Let's click on an enemy. Perfect. If we click on a new one, it's going to deselect. He is flipping out there, which isn't correct. So we'll look into that image angle code in a second, but let's push tab and see what happens. There we go. we are cycling between the enemies. So let's figure out this rotation so we can end this off. Let's go to Object Player. Let's go to his step event. And if I remember correctly, this is actually supposed to be a times rotation speed. Let's save and run and see if that fixed our problem. Okay, so he's not whizzing around, which is great. Let us hit tab. Oh, cool. He points to that guy, tab again, next guy, and so on. Pretty good. So if I manually select an enemy, same thing. Pretty cool. Awesome stuff, guys. So that is the basics of tab targeting. I hope you found this tutorial educational helpful. Please let me know what you think about GameMaker Studio 2. I know I've got a few suggestions to give to the developers right now as of this time, and hopefully if we get all our suggestions out early, it can help them create an awesome IDE in the shortest time span possible. So please feel free to comment, rate, and subscribe. You can find the project files and related tutorial content in the description. If you want to try out a really cool mobile game, please check out my game called Element Earth on the Amazon App Store as well as the Google Play Store for a free demo. If you like this video as well as many of my other videos and would like to support this channel, please check out my Patreon campaign. I do appreciate your support. So until next time, happy coding, and I'll see you then.